Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with Dr. Jessie Mahoney.
And Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are physicians and leaders who are also trained in coaching, yoga, mindfulness, and integrative medicine.
We are also mothers, spouses, sisters, daughters, aunts, and friends.
In this podcast, we share candid, heart-centered, loving, science-based, thoughtful, and often fun conversations about the challenges life throws at us.
With our collective experience of over 30 years in physician and personal wellness, we reflect and offer pearls of wisdom for navigating life's challenges with more ease.
From parenting, marriages, money scarcity, cancer survivorship, uncertainty, challenges in practicing medicine, we cover it all.
We invite you to refresh your perspective and empower yourself with mindset, mindfulness, and other well-being tools that actually work. A quick reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
Welcome to today's episode, Rebuilding Trust in Your Body, Strength, Self-Compassion, and a Mindful Path to Healing. I'm going to share what a personal trainer taught me about rest, buoyancy, and releasing my physician mindset of pushing through. How I learned trust, mindfulness, and strength are built through support, investment, and attention. The intention of this episode is to talk about healing, both physical and emotional, and what it means to rebuild trust in your body after burnout, potentially, or injury, or years of neglect and disconnect. I am also going to share learning to approach strength with trusting your body's wisdom, accepting real life limitations and healing timelines, compassion for everything that your body has been through and carried you through. Remembering that trust, acceptance, and compassion are three of the attitudes, approaches, or tenets of mindfulness that I talk about often. They are vital to healing and growing physical strength. Takeaways are that I hope you'll learn how to trust your body again, especially if you have had medical issues, injury, or who knows what, an accident. I hope you'll take away why acceptance and compassion are essential for building strength, that they are a strength and not a weakness. I hope you'll take away the idea that strength training parallels mindset work and sustainable healing, and how support, investment, and attention are foundations of lasting change. So this episode is dedicated to my personal trainer, who I just started working with 4 or 5 months ago. And he is amazing, unlike any other person I have worked with. And we work together online. I've never met him. But what I notice about him is that he sees me. He literally sees my mind, just like I do as a coach. I see your mind. And it is magic when someone sees your mind. They see what you cannot see yourself. And every time we work together, I notice these surprising parallels with coaching. He very often says, trust yourself. And as I teach in coaching and this podcast, many of us who work in medicine were taught not to trust our bodies. They didn't actually need to sleep. They weren't actually thirsty. They weren't actually tired. They don't actually need to go to the bathroom. And we learn to shut off the messages from our bodies and not trust them. And for those of you who have had a significant medical issue or injury, we very often also don't trust perhaps our strength, or we don't trust perhaps a shoulder that requires care and tenderness. And so this trainer is teaching me to relearn how to trust my body. And he constantly reminds me to trust myself. And he notices when I've pushed too far that I cannot trust myself. And that as trust grows, it grows because you're listening. It grows through mindfulness. It grows through awareness, and it grows through acceptance of your challenges with trust. When you resist the idea that it's a trust issue, you think it's a strength issue, you think it's a form issue. But when you realize it's simply a trust issue, it's easier to make change. So at core, this personal training project, which came to pass because I wanted to get stronger. And I wanted to push beyond some of the limitations that I have from some previous medical complications. And as many of you know, one of my words for the year is beyond. And so in December, I reached out and started to do this work. What I was not prepared for is that the core of rewiring in personal training has really parallels many of the core tenets that I teach in coaching. And that is the background for this podcast. So I want to talk about trust, acceptance, and compassion, because most of us think about training and strength training as I'm going to build muscle, I'm going to push through, it's going to be hard. And many of us talk about having to do it on a regimented schedule and with certain specific goals. And it's very much an energetic drain from that standpoint. Well, though you may feel you have an endorphin rush, but it does afterwards. But it does often feel like it's hard to get there. It feels great afterwards, but it's hard to get there. And what I'll say is when you show up for strengthening your body from a place of acceptance and compassion, and with the intent of growing trust in yourself, the experience is very different. And that rewiring these physically have very much changed how I move. They've changed very much how I exercise. They've changed very much how I do other things, yoga, gardening, hiking. They've changed how I stand as a keynote speaker. They change how I lead. They change how I run my business. They have changed how I parent. Trust, acceptance, and compassion are huge in showing up mindfully and intentionally. So trust is really letting go of the need to control or critique yourself. It's also, as you squat down, trusting that your legs will hold you, trusting that your body is reliable, trusting that you know when you're finished, trusting that when you have done enough, it's true. And I'm not lifting heavy weights. I am actually working out without a single weight using awesome things like the desk that I record this podcast on, the wall, the windowsill. I use a roller and a ball and some bands. But I'm not in a gym. I'm actually doing this in my office in between clients because it works really well for scheduling and enables me to do it. I do short 30-minute sessions where we work on, a couple of things. And I have found this to be the most transformative way to exercise and to take care of myself. Most other times when I have worked out with a trainer, I have gotten hurt, ultimately. And after each session, I'm so uncomfortable or sore that it's not fun. And about 2/3 of the way through, I really wish it were over. So this shorter space really works well for me. But what has really blown my mind is this idea of trust. And I nudge all of you to notice how you can trust your body. And I've actually taught a few yoga classes working on trusting your body, remembering to listen, and trusting the cues, and to begin to be curious and explore. So the second one that I really want to focus on today is acceptance. And for me, this is acceptance of former old injuries, limitations, acceptance of weakness, and acceptance of when my trainer says to me that I'm compensating. I was doing an exercise earlier this week and my wrists were hurting. And he said, well, your wrists are hurting because you're not using your shoulders. And my shoulders are weak. I had surgery and I've had some bleeding into my shoulder and I have scar tissue and my scapula tend to be stuck. And so I compensate a lot. And what I've learned is that when something else hurts, it's usually because you're overusing it to compensate for something that's weak. What a great lesson in medicine. We overcompensate, and we injure ourselves because we're doing that. And so this acceptance of your limitations and meeting them from whatever's happened to you in your life, whether it's childbirth, whether it's a bike accident, whether it's a blood clot, whatever it might be, um, meeting those with presence and accepting, not resisting reality. You can wish it were different, which is different than just pretending that you can go and lift weights just like anybody else. I also want to address compassion, which is one of the key tenets of mindfulness, self-compassion, that has been really helpful for me in this process. It's really the idea that you can release the shame from whatever you can't do, whatever you think you should do, um, and just be with yourself wherever you are in this moment, knowing that whatever you do is growing strength and it's going to help you at some point. Honoring what your body has been through, honoring what it can do, and honoring where it needs extra care. And not using a workout to ignore that, and not using a workout as buffering where it feels good in the moment, you release a lot of dopamine and endorphins, and then you feel terrible later. That is actually not a healthy way to treat your body. It's actually kind of a practice we're used to in medicine, which is sort of self-sacrifice, beat yourself up and tell yourself it's good for you. We have a very much culture of collective suffering. And so coming to exercise and caring for your body from a place of compassion is pretty magical. The last one I'll add that I haven't mentioned is curiosity and being interested in why something is hard. I notice that very often an exercise is much harder on one side than the other. And rather than jumping to judgment, which is a mindful, anti-mindful approach, showing up with non-judgment and showing up with curiosity. I wonder why it's harder on this side. I wonder if I turn my toe this way or something like that, if things would change. So rather than showing up judging yourself and show up curious, it's pretty magical. So what I have discovered over the last 5 months is that I have finally stopped pushing through in terms of exercise. And I have finally learned to partner with my body, but I didn't do it alone. I learned to partner with myself and my body by partnering with someone else who is able to be a mirror and able to see the things that I cannot see within myself. And it has been one of the most incredible coaching experiences that I have. I have done a lot of mindset coaching, but this body coaching reminds me very much of my approach to coaching. It's mindful, it's thoughtful, it's purposeful, it's intentional. And you're working on tiny micro shifts. Tiny subtle shifts make a big difference. And so I was going to share 14 mindful strength lessons that apply when you are exercising, but really apply everywhere in your life. So number one is subtle is significant. Something I say in yoga all the time. And the idea is that the tiniest shift creates a huge change. And very often my trainer will say, turn your toes 1 centimeter to the left. And all of a sudden I have engagement in my old injured hip. And it's pretty amazing. Put your hand up 1 centimeter, turn your hips slightly to the right, and all of a sudden the exercise hits in a very different way. And so remembering this idea that we don't have to change big things. Subtle is significant, and the smallest shifts can create huge change. The next one is that micro movements can create tremendous stability. And it's tiny tweaks in your form actually lead to different results. And so it's a form thing. Micro movements create stability. So this isn't about creating strength, it's about creating stability. And it's pretty magical to see the difference. And I encourage you to think about in your life, whether it's on an exercise mat or whether it's in your parenting or your marriage or your career, what micro movement, micro shift, might create stability. The next one I mentioned, non-judgment changes everything. Being curious beats critiquing yourself every single time. When we blame ourselves and shame ourselves and maybe feel guilty that we didn't work out or ashamed that we're not strong enough or that we can't do something or that we release cortisol and norepinephrine, and they don't help us continue to want to work out. They're not motivating. They actually make us tired and they may make us not want to work out. And so recognizing that you can show up with non-judgment, you can just wonder why it didn't work for you. This approach in mindfulness of hands wide open to exercising and what your body can and cannot do is pretty powerful. And I'm reminded in this non-judgment moment that very early on, I did an episode about changing a relationship with your body and showing up with non-judgment. And it was really more about what you looked like. But this is very similar. It's just what you can do, what your body can do. And remembering it isn't a place for judgment. Our bodies have done amazing things. They've climbed amazing mountains. They've birthed babies, many of us. They have done surgeries. And we spend all our time judging and being mean to them. And what if instead we showed up curious rather than critiquing ourselves? The next is feeling stronger makes you more confident. And so when confidence is embodied, that is actually a form of strength. And strength makes you feel confident. So you get it both ways. And so just remembering that spending time exercising is a way of growing confidence and it's a way of growing trust in your body. And when you have those, you stand taller and you show up with a different energy and a different approach. And that can be really powerful if you are on stage as a speaker. It can be really powerful if you're a physician. It can be really powerful if you're advocating in a leadership meeting. So noticing how feeling stronger makes you potentially feel more confident certainly makes me feel more confident. The next one is that a healthier body literally equals a healthier everything. And that when we are stronger, we have better energy. We tend to have more clarity. We tend to have healthier relationships. We tend to make healthier choices when our bodies feel better. And so paying attention to your body and investing in it and treating it well actually improves the health of many things well beyond your body. And so you might think of it as if you work in medicine and you have long days, and I was a pediatrician, I had to lift up children all the time. Having a strong body is actually a form of career sustainability, preventing injury. Surgeons, for example, and OBGYNs who are delivering babies, they actually use a lot of physical strength in their work. And so a healthier body allows you to have a more sustainable career. And when you're in pain because something needs attention, or maybe like me, you had a chronic injury for which you didn't actually do effective PT. You went back to work and you never attended to it. Attending to it can actually be a sustainability strategy. Number 6 is that pushing is not the answer. Growth doesn't come from force. And that is one of the things that I've learned in this remarkable strength training experience. Very often we think that strength is a force thing. We push ourselves. We go right to the edge. And what I know is that I'm exceptional at pushing myself, but I lose motivation. And where I grow the most is where I pay attention to the tiny things, where I listen, where I notice if my glute med is engaged or not, where I notice if my scapula is stuck or raised. My trainer very often has me do this shrug while you're doing a plank, changes the entire experience. He very often has you flex your ankles and do every exercise with that. And it changes the experience. Subtle is significant, but it also makes you notice that it's not about pushing. It's about these tiny little things. And in fact, sometimes backing off and trusting and relaxing in is actually the answer. He's always telling me to slow down. In fact, he has this funny phrase where you pause and he's like, let people get off the elevator before you move back on. And noticing, as I often say, we have such an urgency bias and it shows up in our workouts. Our lack of trust shows up in our workouts. Our over judging shows up in our workouts. Our self-sacrificing and martyrdom shows up in our workouts. And so what I have found through this experience is that literally working on my body has allowed me to embody some of these changes that are impacting the way that I think. And I have done a tremendous amount of work on my mindset, but bringing the body into it is a game changer. We call it embodiment. And it's one of the reasons that at retreats, I bring in coaching. It's one of the reasons that I suggest doing tree pose before a meeting. I have some clients who do tree pose in the OR before a difficult case or in the interventional radiology suite. And it's really about embodying many of these tenets that you're learning and ways you want to move through the life and ways you want to move through your life. And when you embody it in your cells is when you integrate it. It becomes a part of you. And the changes remain, they're sustained. Number 7 is something we all know, but most of us don't practice. Adequate rest leads to more impact. And rest is where strength is built, not lost. And so while you may not want to take days off or rest, you may not take days off of work, resting is where you restore. And remembering that resting is where you reset and resting is where you go strength. So resting in between workouts, or for me, doing half-hour workouts and resting for a whole day till I do the next one, has actually allowed me to make a lot more progress. So more is not better, and rest is restorative, regenerative, and helpful. Be deliberate is the next one. And intentional movement is powerful. And very often when you move intentionally, you pause at the top, let people off the elevator, or you move slowly, or you squat in a very specific way, that can actually change the strength that you grow. So being deliberate in an exercise and being deliberate and intentional in your life is incredibly powerful. The next one is keep your head out of it. And one of the things that my trainer is always telling me is to, first of all, stay out of your head in terms of the thought. But I actually fling my head around a lot when I'm lifting or moving. And he was actually telling me I was having some dizziness when I was doing a lot of work in the garden because I would squat and I'd be planting and digging and weeding. And then I would stand up quickly because that's what we do in medicine. And I would also stand up with sort of some force, flinging my head back. And when I brought this up to him and said, do you have any thoughts? Like, is it because my legs aren't strong enough? He said, oh no, it's just because you fling your head back. You put your head in everything. And I had never had anyone say that to me. So keep your head out of it. Your body knows what's right. Take your time, move intentionally. And you might find that you can garden for hours without dizziness, which is what I discovered. And so when I'm doing squats, for example, I tend to move my head. I tend to move my head a lot. And most of us that are in our heads and use our brains for a living, we tend to move our head a lot. And so noticing what you're doing with your head and keeping your head out of it, because when you're working out, you're rarely working on your head or your neck. Number 10 is that you are stronger when you get help. And that is my message here with this podcast is that when I got help and hired a coach, essentially, a body coach, which was for me an area of growth that I haven't attended to consistently, largely because I was afraid because of previous injuries. And I have found a way to work around my injuries in yoga and be compassionate. But as I mentioned in a recent podcast about my thoracic outlet obstruction. That actually came as a result of getting into shape after my second child, and it landed me in the ICU. So I actually have a lot of trauma about working with personal trainers and lifting weights. And so it actually has taken me almost 20 years to get back to this, though I have done bits and pieces here and there. But because as a result of that surgery, I have a lot of scar tissue and I have some range of motion issues and I have some neurologic deficits, it's always very hard to find the right person. And I have always known that it's stronger to get help. And I would say it's stronger, even if you're healthy, to get help. And that when you're healthy, you can actually move forward much more quickly. And again, the parallels to coaching are just magical. So support is not a weakness. It's a strength and it's a strategy. And when you get help that is aligned and you work with someone who is experienced and can see you, the results can be literally transformative. And this is what I see in coaching. When people work with me and we're a good fit, and I am able to see them, they say, how do you know that this is how I think? It changes everything. If there's someone who's a mirror into you, who's able to watch and able to pick up these cues, subtle cues in the words that you say and the way that you move. I actually love doing coaching on Zoom because of the body language. And I love even more doing it in person at retreats because then you can really sense the energy. So you're stronger when you get help. Number 11 is we resist what's uncomfortable. And so just remembering that if it's uncomfortable, that's different than pain. Pain is not where we grow, but very often that edge of discomfort is where we don't want to go. And it's really understanding what the difference between pain and discomfort is and what is unfamiliar as opposed to painful is the distinction. And a lot of that is literally relearning your body. Number 12 is that there is not a right versus a wrong way to do it. There's a more effective way. And the other thing that I often say in coaching is the right way is the right way for you. Many people say, what's the right way and the wrong way? We have a very strong tendency of right and wrong in medicine. But the right way is the right way for your body. Personalize it for your body. And we know that in medicine, we personalize things for people's body, but we don't personalize things for our own body. And our minds and our bodies are integral to everything that we do, whether it's practicing medicine, whether it's parenting, whether it's grandparenting. You have to lift up heavy grandchildren. And even in your marriage, a healthy body is critical. It's critical to be able to garden. It's critical to be able to walk. And so recognizing that you are worth it and investing in personalizing things for your body is really powerful. And you may not need it forever, but sometimes you need to start with that. Remembering also that your version of strength is unique. And so for me, having any shoulder strength is unique. I have limitations in lifting my right arm above my head. And so getting my arm even close to that is a win for me. And so remembering that your version of strength is unique to you. Being able to stand for long periods of time without lower back pain, that is strength to me. Being able to stand tall and proud in a sleeveless dress to give a talk, that is strength to me. I don't have crazy flabby arms, for example. Not that it would matter if I did, but I like wearing sleeveless dresses. And so for me, being able to do that with confidence is powerful. My version of strength is being able to pick up my almost 2-year-old grandson who is substantial. My version of strength is being able to garden and squat for hours and lift bags of soil and be able to prune trees and prune bushes and weed. And that is what I want to be able to do with it. My version of strength is to be able to hike the wildflower trails. Thinking about what your version of strength is. When I was practicing pediatrics, it was being able to lift the kids, hold them down, and to be able to get up and down and do a very physical job all day long. In peds, you're on the floor, you're, twisted and contorted all over the table, trying to listen to kids and check their ears. And so my version of strength was literally being able to do that. For some people, it's going to be able deadlifting or squatting, but that's not my version of strength. My version of strength is very functional. And it's really helpful to think, what's your version of strength? What's your version of success? I talk about that often and defining it for yourself. And then the last one is that building strength and working with someone on taking good care of your body doesn't have to be torture. In fact, I would advocate it shouldn't be. Ideally, it would feel good. It would be a form of nourishment, and there might even be joy, fun, laughter in it. And so remembering that it can and probably should feel good and it can feel nourishing. Remembering that we're sort of trained to sacrifice ourselves. And if it's torture, then it means we're doing more work and we're getting stronger. And so notice your tendency to go that way and potentially back off and see what you can do with some of this more subtle things. And you might be really surprised. So just a reminder about how the physician mindset can play in and what we might want to consider paying attention to as physicians and in medical training, and many high achievers as well. We're trained to push through. We're trained to override the signals of our body. We are trained that doing more is better. And what I would offer is what I have learned is healing doesn't come from doing more. It comes from honoring. And building strength doesn't come from more. It comes from presence. It comes from mindfulness. It comes from paying attention. It comes from compassion. It comes from acceptance. It comes from curiosity. It comes from non-judgment. It comes from trusting yourself and relearning how to trust yourself. And for those of you who have worked with me and have been on retreats, you know that list I just gave. There's more to it, but many of those will sound familiar. And they're many of the tenets of mindfulness. And many of those things, as I often say, they're the antidote to many of these thought patterns that we were taught that are, when not used discerningly, can be literally harmful. They can cause us harm. And we took an oath to do no harm. And so this training experience has gone so far beyond what I engaged in it for. And I think it's also lovely to think that, things are very often much better than we expect. We can learn things that we never imagined when we engage in something. And so I do not look at this as self-care. I look at this as like learning and growth and honoring my body and allowing me to be healthy and growing my speaking presence. I can think about it in all these ways that make it fun and also don't make it indulgent. I actually think it's very likely the best investment I could possibly make. And I want to nudge you that investing in your own well-being is literally one of the best investments you can make. And I don't think that I would have appreciated all the subtleties to this physical training experience had I not done the mindset work first. And I'm able to spot it and take advantage of it and utilize my mindfulness and my mindset work amidst, and it's allowed me to really make progress in a way that I was never able to in the many times I have tried physical therapy and going back to the gym and workout classes over the years. So a few reflection questions. Where can you begin to trust your body again? Whether it's on a yoga mat, whether it's doing tree pose, whether it's working with a trainer, whether it's doing Pilates, whether it's practicing balance, thinking about where you can begin to trust your body again. Maybe it's literally trusting whether you're full, trusting your hunger cues, trusting your thirst cues, trusting your restroom cues, trusting your tired cues, and not discounting what you hear. Trusting that the answer is reliable and reasonable and not lazy and not complacent. Where can you meet your limitations, your physical limitations, and perhaps time limitations, energy limitations with acceptance? rather than compassion? And what would it look like to move through your workday, your life, your health, your exercise, your movement choices, your eating choices, your relationship choices from a place of compassion and kindness and non-judgment? So my final message is trust, acceptance, and compassion are skills. They can be built just like muscles, and they require intention, consistency, and care, just like being healthy and just like growing strength. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope this was entertaining and I hope that it resonated with you. If you are ready to step out of the pushing and doing more and step into trust, acceptance, and compassion and curiosity and non-judgment, reach out, because working on your mindset can help you work on your health. In fact, getting help with that is probably the single best investment you can make in yourself. Please remember that you are not alone and that strength, trust, and mindfulness are built with support, investment, and attention. So join me for coaching, join me for a retreat where we'll practice a lot of this in person. And I would love to hear from any of you. Please share your thoughts. And please, please, please share this podcast as well. We put a lot of effort into these episodes. We put a lot of time and energy and money into recording them and having them edited and putting them out into the world. And I know that these messages are incredibly important for many more humans than are aware of this podcast. So I nudge you and encourage you all to please share this podcast with at least one person in the next week. And we look forward to spending some time with you again a week from now. May you all have a beautiful day. May you all invest in yourself. May you all learn to trust your body, listen to your body, accept your body, and show up for yourself, mind, body, spirit, with acceptance and curiosity. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We encourage you to dive into the show notes for each episode for more learnings and resources.
We also invite you to take a listen to the many other Mindful Healers podcast episodes. And please share the podcast far and wide with colleagues, friends, and family.
If our message and approach resonate with you, we would love to work with you.
When you listen to a podcast, you consume information, but when you work with us, you can actually practice and change.
We offer coaching and mindfulness experiences, talks, workshops, retreats, and more. Connect with us at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
The content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. We invite you to participate in the mindful moments we offer at the end of most of our podcasts, but please only do so safely.